Hey guys, it's Bridget with San Diego Seed Company, and today I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of planting directly into the ground and everything you need to consider to make that successful. So the in-ground versus raised bed debate shouldn't even be a debate because one isn't necessarily better than the other. It's all about understanding the pros and cons of both scenarios, which this is actually going to be 2 videos, so stay tuned, so that you know how to make the best out of your situation and your conditions. If you watch this whole video, you're going to feel very confident about understanding the pros and cons of planting directly into native soil and all the things you need to do to make that a successful process. And spoiler alert, we're also going to do another video on this exact same topic, but focusing on raised beds. So you can be confident and really understand the difference between the two and make a good decision in the beginning of your gardening journey. So I just want to show you guys a really cool photo of what this property used to look like almost 10 years ago and what it looks like now, and how we've transformed this area into what used to be just a dry wasteland of tumbleweeds into now a beautiful, thriving garden that has really amazing soil. Now, the reason why I want to show you that is because I want you to know that it is totally possible to have a garden without a raised bed. All of the garden that you see here, except the few raised beds that we have, is planted in ground. And we're going to talk about the pros and cons of that and why I made that decision to do that early on and why that has changed over time depending on my needs. Now in your garden, everything is going to be specific to your particular conditions, your sun exposure, your soil. But again, I want you to make that decision with all the right pros and cons in mind so that you feel confident that it is the right decision, and also know that throughout your gardening journey, it can change depending on how your property and your sun exposure and your soil changes. So let me show you guys what our soil looks like now after many years of working it. You can see there's this beautiful layer of black on top, and then as you get further down, the soil is not as good, but still, it's very pliable. It's got plenty of moisture in it, even though we haven't gotten any rain. That's because I have the irrigation. And this is from years of adding compost and tons of mulch. If you watch my videos, you know that I'm a little obsessed with mulch. It's kind of like this magic thing that transforms a garden in zone 9 and 10. And this is all the steps that we took to change this soil from something that literally couldn't grow anything but a couple of weeds to a thriving, beautiful garden. Now, when we moved in, we decided to do direct in-ground planting, no raised beds. And I'm going to tell you one of the main reasons why we did that. Because we bought a house in Southern California and we could barely afford the house. And so I didn't have any more money for the expense of raised beds. So one of the first pros and cons is you have less materials up front. So you can actually plant directly in the ground and you don't have to buy the timber or anything to build the raised beds. Now, the con of that is you are going to have to amend the soil. To get the soil to look like this, you're going to have to bring in tons of compost and mulch. And I'm not going to go into detail on how you make beautiful, magical soil like this, but I have tons of videos that do. And we also have classes and we have tons of education. So all the information is out there. That's not what I want to focus on in this video. But just know that number one, you can either decide to put time, money, and energy into the soil, or time and money and energy on top of the soil via raised bed materials. So the second pro or con that I want to talk about when you're deciding whether or not to plant directly in the ground is your investment. So no matter what you do in gardening, you have to build good soil because good soil is what grows good plants. And whether or not you're doing that by filling a raised bed or planting directly into the ground, the investment really is the same. But the pro to doing it directly in the ground is you have a bigger area in which you can invest time, money, and energy, and it will stay there. And what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is we invested in all of the soil. Everything here basically looked like the soil that you see in that walkway. It was absolutely terrible. And now it's beautiful black soil that I can use at any time. No matter what I do, if I change these rows, if I move my spacing, I know that every single inch of this garden has good soil. Some areas are better than others, but every inch is plantable space. Now that's a big pro. Now the con to that is actually physically getting it in here. So we're really lucky that we have a big long driveway that you can get a truck right up here, and we can use wheelbarrows and we can bring in truckloads and truckloads of compost and mulch. And that's allowed us to amend the soil to make it really beautiful. Now you have to decide in your particular situation whether or not you want to take on a project like that or use a raised bed where you can put the actual product inside. For me personally, I know that I'm investing in every single inch of this garden, and whether or not I decide to continue doing vegetable and flower production here, or maybe one day I want to fill this with trees, I know that I can plant anything throughout this whole area and know that I've got good soil to grow happy plants. So the third pro or con of planting directly in the ground is that you can actually have denser planting. Now that's because I'm not restricted by just a certain amount of soil. As I mentioned in the previous point, all of this soil is great because I've amended it, and I can actually put plants closer together because there is an endless amount, in theory, of soil where the roots can go down. It's not limited by the 12 or 18 inches of a container or a raised bed. These roots can go anywhere, which is absolutely fabulous, and it also means that there is a bigger sponge for moisture to be held in the soil. Because all of this area can hold moisture, then, especially in zone 9 and 10 where it's really dry, these plants, in theory, have access to all of that moisture. Now the con of that is also all of your moisture and your nutrients are going to get displaced throughout this whole big area. It's not concentrated in a container or a raised bed. And when you're a brand new gardener, and especially if you don't have drip irrigation, that can be a con, because if you're hand watering, your water can just basically flow out of this area. You can be watering weeds, and your fertilizer that you put in, especially if it's liquid, that can run off into other areas. So that's a con of doing it directly in the ground. So just to review, when you're planting directly in the ground, because you have a lot of soil volume, plants can be closer together and denser planting because they have more room for their roots to grow. But the downfall of that is soil, moisture, and fertilizer can spread out further and be further away from the plants. All right, so the last pro or con that I want to mention when you're considering planting directly in the ground is water holding capacity. I kind of touched on it in the other points, but I really want to run this point home because it really matters, especially for people who are gardening in dry and hot climates like most of zone 9 and 10. So when you're planting directly in the ground, the water holding capacity you have is almost exponential compared to what you have in a container or a raised bed, because there is, in theory, an infinite amount of soil underneath those plants. It goes on and on and on and on and on. And so if you can get water particles down further into the ground when you are planting directly in native soil that's been amended, then the amount of time it takes to have that moisture evaporate is longer. Basically, if I can get water, because I'm using drip irrigation, 12, 18, 21 inches into the ground, that moisture is going to stay there a lot longer than it would if it's in something like a raised bed or a container. Now, the pro, especially if you're in an area that gets rainfall, is when it rains, this whole garden is a big, huge sponge, and it holds on to tons of moisture. In fact, in a normal year, not this year because we haven't gotten much rain, or any actually, we're hoping for a rainstorm, but in a normal year, I turn off the irrigation because this soil is a big sponge and it's gonna hold on to all the seasonal rain that we get, and I don't even have to turn on the irrigation until almost springtime. Now, if I was doing raised beds or pots, that wouldn't be the case because the surface area is increased, the drying winds suck out the moisture quicker, and there's just less volume of soil to hold on to moisture. Now, a con of that is that you have to have good soil to hold on to moisture. And here's a prime example. This is beautiful, gorgeous soil, but this soil here, which is what the native soil actually looked like when we moved in, is terrible. And it doesn't hold any moisture. In fact, when we get rain, it just floods down here. So you have to turn something like this into something absolutely beautiful. Like, let's dig in here and see something dark and gorgeous like this so that it can hold on to moisture. But again, I really want to run this point home, and I don't even think I'm saying that right. I just want to push this point so that you understand gardening is an investment in your time, in your mental health, in your happiness, and in Mother Nature. I garden because I want to have a positive impact on my community, on my soil, on the insects that are around me. I want to put more back into the soil than I take out. And that's reflective of everything that I believe in gardening. And so even though in-ground gardening takes more time, more energy in some aspects, I know the investment is solid. And whether or not this is just a vegetable garden or it becomes an orchard one day, I know that I've put the time, money, and energy into the soil, and it's going to give back to me tenfold in all my gardening dreams. All right, so in full transparency, I want to make sure that you really know all of the cons of in-ground planting, since towards the end of that last clip, I got a little emotional about in-ground planting. And I just want you to know that there's no right or wrong way. So I actually have a list, of all of the cons that I want to mention. So in-ground planting cons is, it is more maintenance. You do have more weeds. I do have more gophers. That's a real thing. The soil warms a lot slower because there's so much of it. The soil structure is inconsistent throughout this whole area. It also has less density, so there's a limit to airflow, which means more maintenance, and it's reduced accessibility, meaning I gotta get on my hands and knees more because everything is further down. So your particular garden should serve your particular needs, and knowing the pros and cons, making a nice little list so that you can make a good decision is the best way that you can set up your garden so that it can serve you for many, many years. So if you're a new gardener, and particularly if you're in zone 9 and 10, subscribe to our channel so we can help you be the best gardener yet. And comment on this video and let us know, is there something that we missed, or do you have a question about in-ground growing that we can clarify so that you can get off to the best start in your garden possible? Now remember, so much in gardening seems like it's a debate on what's better, what's the right way. Everybody's situation is different. Everybody's soil and sun exposure and garden setup is different. So for me as a teacher, I like to teach you to know the differences in your circumstances so you can make the best decision in your particular garden and understand the why. Why would I do raised beds versus in-ground and what the difference is.